So I wanted to talk today about the different ways of transferring an image from a photograph onto your canvas or your paper or whatever you're working on, and the difference it makes to the finished product depending on what method you use to do that. One of the easiest ways is obviously tracing, printing off a photograph and tracing. And you may want to flip the photograph on your PC first before you print it out and then trace it, so that when you transfer it to your canvas or your paper, it's the right way round. And the other method is to use a small digital projector. They're quite cheap these days, and very good high resolution. And those two methods are definitely the quickest and the easiest ways of marking out either a portrait or a landscape, whatever it is you're working on, or still life. You can get everything marked in, so you know that everything is in the right place, kind of without a doubt. There's not really any room for error there, and that's kind of all well and good. But there are some drawbacks to using that method. So I think if you use the method of tracing or a projector, then what you're going to end up producing, almost inevitably, there's not really any way around this, is you're going to produce an illustration. And it may be a very complex illustration, and it may be quite a painterly illustration, but it will still be an illustration, in my opinion. Now, I use all these methods, and I have done for a lot of years. I've produced, hundreds of drawings, both by tracing and using a projector, and I've also produced hundreds, if not thousands, of drawings and paintings just working by eye and using measuring sticks and proportional dividers and things like that. So I would say that the key difference there is, well, one, yes, with one method you're more likely to produce an illustration as opposed to a painting. But the most significant aspect of this, I think, is that if you use tracing or projectors, then your illustrations are actually going to be similar to other people's in certain aspects. Now, obviously, there are things you can do to make it more unique to you. But if you get 100 people all to do the same subject using the tracing method, there's going to be a lot of similarities probably in the finished products, and a lot of variety too. However, if you want to be sure of creating something that is not just unique to you, I mean, well, yes, unique to you, but also very, your idiosyncrasies are what are coming out, are what are making it unique. And if you don't actually want to have to worry about how to make your drawings, different or unique or to stand out from anybody else's, then the best way to do that is work from eye. And the reason for that is, if you use tracing or a projection, then everybody is going to mark out the same things in a scene or a portrait or whatever. The details are what the details are, and everyone's going to mark them all out in exactly the same way. If you work from eye, then that's a totally different thing, because everyone who looks at either somebody's face or a landscape or whatever, everyone is going to be drawn to something different in that scene. Different aspects of it are going to be more noticeable to you. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But the upshot is that does mean the less effort you make to be different or unique, the more different and unique you will be, because you are unique. You can't get away from that. You are a unique, idiosyncratic individual, and what you see when you look at something is always different to what anyone else sees. It can never be the same. And so that will show more in the finished product. It also has the advantage of a kind of looser, freer, more intuitive way of working, more instinctive way of working, possibly. However, it doesn't mean that there should be any loss at all in accuracy. Your proportions and measurements can be just as accurate working from eye, even if you're not using measuring sticks or proportional dividers and that sort of thing. Again, if you work in a sort of impressionistic style, and most paintings are impressionistic, it's just a question of degree, then you can capture detail and accuracy almost by accident because you're implying it or you're suggesting it. And that to the viewer can sometimes seem more accurate and more realistic than a picture that has been marked out very cleanly and concisely using a projector or tracing. So when you are working from eye, obviously you can do things like you can hold up your paintbrush and you use your thumb to mark out distances. So like, you know, my head, you see the top of the pen is there, so my thumb would be down there, and then I can make different measurements. But obviously you've always got to have your arm, your thumb has got to be the same distance from your eye, so you kind of always really want a locked arm so that there's not variation. And also the brush has to be the same distance from your source material. So if you're holding your arm like that, you then you can't have any movement with your body, you can't have any movement, you've got to be absolutely fixed and rigid. Then you transfer that to your canvas or your paper, and that's one way of doing it. And another way is you can get one of these, a proportional divider, and these are brilliant. There you can just mark out distances 1 to 1, so I could mark where my eyes are, get them accurate like that, and then just transfer it to my drawing. And if I want to enlarge, if I'm working from a photograph, then I can move this, and that's why they call it proportional divider. So this end would be larger than this end. So you can make things bigger or smaller using proportional dividers. But yeah, anyway, I think that kind of covers it. I just really wanted to point out the main differences um, that will result depending on what method you use in those initial early stages of marking out the details on your canvas. And like I say, there's pros and cons to all methods. I like switching from one to the other. Sometimes, you know, one method stands out just more clearly. I mean, especially for illustration work, then using projectors and tracings makes more sense. But they also, you know, can be used for doing portraits as well. But I have to say that I tend to prefer the results when I work using measuring things and working by eye. I tend to always prefer the result. I still sometimes use tracing or projection, usually just if I'm trying to save time, or if, you know, sometimes you may not have the confidence, you know, to mark out. You think, oh, you know, and it's very, you know, it's time consuming, and it does require skill. It does, you know, you get better at it the longer you do it. So yeah, pros and cons to all those different methods. I hope I covered them and kind of made it clear what the difference is between either tracing or working by eye. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will speak to you again soon. Cheers.